Esteemed guests, please welcome the Chief of Staff of the National Endowment for the Arts, Rod Joy.
Human creativity is by far the most powerful force on the planet. And it's an honor to be here today, connected with individuals who promote and exercise that power. My name is Rod Joy, and I'm proud to serve as the Chief of Staff at the National Endowment for the Arts. For 55 years, the Arts Endowment has worked to strengthen the creative capacity of our communities by providing all Americans with diverse opportunities to experience and participate in the arts. As you all know well, this past year has been full of trauma, loss, and hardship, especially in the arts sector. Through action, President Biden and Vice President Harris are committed to meeting the challenge of this crisis. Over the last 2 months, they have taken bold steps to reduce suffering in this country, to put people back to work, and to gain control of the virus. This includes the historic American Rescue Plan, which President Biden signed into law on March 11th. We are grateful to the President and to Congress that this $1.9 trillion COVID relief package includes support for arts organizations and cultural workers hard hit by the pandemic. Now more than ever, America's artists and cultural organizations have a vital role to play in healing and uniting our communities. This moment demands that we tap into the beauty, the empathy, and the imagination of our artists and arts organizations in order to usher in a healthier and more hopeful future. Whether it's contributing to the well-being of our rural communities or building vaccine confidence among Black, Latino, and Indigenous Americans, the arts sector is essential to our national recovery. And to build back better, we know we must also reopen our cultural spaces safely and successfully. The art of reopening is an evidence-based playbook on how to do just that. And now at this time, I'm pleased to introduce one of the most respected leaders in our field today. To lead you through the remainder of today's program, I'm going to turn it over to the Director of Research and Analysis at the National Endowment for the Arts, Sunil Iyengar. Sunil, please take it away.
Thank you very much, Ra. And good afternoon, everyone. At the Arts Endowment, we've had the pleasure of working with our colleagues at the National Institutes of Health on many occasions, most recently around exploring the potential of music to improve outcomes for health, well-being, and brain development. So we're proud and delighted to welcome yet another NIH colleague, one who has been working tirelessly for our nation's benefit for more than 35 years. As director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, Dr. Tony Fauci has become instantly recognizable to most Americans as the voice of science and reason in helping us get through the pandemic. But many of us in government research have looked to him for years as the standard of how scientific evidence should ideally be communicated to the public and for the purpose of making policy decisions. I was fortunate to meet him in the mid-1990s when, as a journalist, I reported on health policy and biomedical research. So it's a great thrill to be able to introduce him in quite a different capacity. Dr. Fauci.
Warm greetings to you all. My name is Tony Fauci, and I'm the director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases and the chief medical advisor for COVID-19 to President Joe Biden. I am delighted to welcome cultural leaders from across the country to this virtual event, The Art of Reopening, hosted by the National Endowment of the Arts. I commend the NEA for its thoughtful approach to imagining how to reopen art spaces safely as we emerge from the darkest days of the COVID-19 pandemic. As you have lived and know well, the past year has been extremely difficult for the arts community. COVID-19 forced the shutdown of so-called non-essential businesses, including visual and performing art venues, which had a devastating effect. Consider the shocking unemployment rates among artists. Nearly 50% of actors and almost 22% of musicians were unemployed in the last quarter of 2020, as compared with nearly 7% of people nationally during that same period. And so I am genuinely heartened, although it comes as no surprise, to see how your famous creativity is not limited to producing art. As your guide, The Art of Reopening, shows, your ingenuity also extends to how arts organizations are adapting, continuing to operate, and inventing new ways to engage your audiences. We are all tired of the constraints imposed on us by this pandemic, and I often get asked, when can we go back to a Broadway show, see a movie at a theater, or visit a museum? I too cannot wait to get back to these activities. Some places, such as New York State, will soon allow arts and entertainment centers to reopen in a limited way. While this is welcome news, we must not declare victory prematurely. Our most important task as a nation right now is to reduce the level of circulating virus to a very low level, much less than the tens of thousands of cases we currently are seeing each day. And so, get vaccinated when you are eligible, continue to wear a mask and socially distance when out in public, pay attention to the evolving public health guidance issued by the CDC, and together we will continue down the path we are on towards some sort of normality. We are incredibly fortunate that the United States now has 3 extraordinarily safe and efficacious COVID-19 vaccines authorized for emergency use. And both our vaccine supply and our rate of vaccination are accelerating steadily. Like a multi-act play, however, pandemics are dynamic events. And in this COVID-19 pandemic, the behavior of the coronavirus, as well as the people affected by it, are the star players in how things will ultimately turn out. The next few months will provide a critical opportunity for us to get ahead of the virus and the variants it is spawning. If enough people get vaccinated, and if we are careful in reopening and resuming activities. Based on current projections, I believe we likely could see a return to more fully opened movie and Broadway theaters sometime in the fall. This is no guarantee, and at least initially, we may still need to wear masks. If we continue to vaccinate as many people as we can as quickly as possible, however, I believe we will achieve a broad umbrella of protection, somewhere between 70 to 85% of people vaccinated, by late summer to early fall. Those who are vaccinated will not only protect themselves, but also will serve as a dead end to virus spread, protecting the minority remaining who either cannot or have not been vaccinated. So thank you for your commitment to safely maintaining, reinventing, and advancing the arts during such a difficult time. Art in all its forms is vital to the health and well-being of us as individuals and as communities. I wish you all the best for an engaging and productive meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Fauci. In a little while, I'll talk with 3 arts leaders who oversee organizations working in dance, theater, and independent film, respectively. Each of these professionals participated in interviews for the report that the Arts Endowment issued back in January, The Art of Reopening, a guide to current practices among arts organizations during COVID-19. So think a little bit about that subtitle for a moment, a guide to current practices. As we in the arts know, and as all the world has seen, over the last several months, the ground beneath us has been shifting rapidly and constantly. What we identified as current when the report was written in late 2020 may not reflect the conditions of all arts organizations today. Fortunately, many of the lessons from that report still hold broad relevance for many types of arts practitioners who seek to rebuild audiences, visitors, participants, and learners for their in-person programs, exhibits, and performances. So just a little bit about the report. My colleague at the Arts Endowment, Patricia Moore Schaefer, and I combed over existing guides and reports, and we also interviewed arts leaders across the nation to identify common practices, but also tips and tools that can help arts organizations re-engage with audiences or visitors in physical spaces. The report also benefits from surveys of national arts service organizations and individual case studies of 9 organizations that all managed successfully to hold in-person activities and events over the summer of 2020. So now that we're near the end of March 2021, we thought it would be a good time to check in with 3 of those groups to see where we've been, where we are now, and where we might be headed, just as there's emerging some hopeful signs that perhaps we'll get this pandemic under control soon. Before we begin, I want to quote something a former NEA chair, Jane Chu, used to say after she'd come back from her many trips visiting with arts groups and artists around the country. If you've seen one community, she would say, you've only seen one community. The arts in this country are so extensive, so diverse and multifaceted, they are almost impossible to generalize. Instead, I think you'll enjoy hearing the unique insights of 3 people I view as social entrepreneurs, blazing the way for their peers to engage with audiences and visitors, again, in physical spaces. So let me introduce them. We have with us Scott Altman, President and CEO of Cincinnati Ballet, Chloe Cook, Executive Director of Sidewalk Film Center and Cinema in Birmingham, Alabama, and Rebecca Reed Medrano, co-founder and Executive Director of Gala Hispanic Theater here in Washington, D.C. So we've discussed how this will work. I'll ask them 3 rounds of questions, but this will be a free-flowing exchange. Tangents, sidebars, and interruptions are welcome. Then we'll leave about 10 minutes for Q&A. So here's the first round of questions. So first, I'd like to ask each of you to tell us how you reacted as an organization back in February or March of 2020 when COVID-19 first hit us. Maybe you could just discuss what your organization does briefly and how the steps it took to re-engage with live audiences or visitors over the spring or summer when you reopened. Let's start with you, Chloe.
Hi, thank you, Sunil. We were closely watching what our peers across the country were doing, those that host film festivals in different parts of the country, as well as those who own or operate movie theaters. And those peers in places like the Pacific Northwest were letting us know that their communities were shutting down as a response to the virus. And we, I think, just felt a strong social responsibility to not be a breeding ground for the virus in our theater space, and made the really, really difficult decision to close our doors after only 5 months of being open. Our organization is 22 years old, but the cinema itself was, not even at the halfway mark of 1 year of operations when we had to close. So it was a challenging time, but we really were just looking, like I said, at our peers to determine how they were responding and try to make the very best decision.
And Chloe, just to jump in a bit, what tactically did you do? Because I know maybe you want to just tell people a little bit about like the drive-in and all that.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So once we closed our doors, within 7 days, we had developed new programs that were COVID safe, some that people could participate in from home, virtual filmmaking competitions and that sort of a thing, as well as educational programs. In the summer, when it was legal for us to do so, we began a drive-in series, frankly, in the parking lot of a big box movie theater that could not operate at the time. So we did 8 weeks of drive-ins, and then we host our annual film festival at a local multiplex drive-in venue as well.
And when you really got community members coming to these things, right? Local people, or were they coming from far? They were coming from far or wide, or just mostly local?
I would say for the drive-in series that we did throughout the summer, that was a primarily local audience. We sold out every single one of those events, which was, great. For the festival, we do tend to have a slightly broader draw. Generally, under normal circumstances, people come from all over the world. But in this year, I would say maybe a 60-mile radius was about as far as most people were driving for the drive-in version of the fest.
Thank you, Chloe. Scott, maybe you can take us back to Cincinnati Ballet and what you did.
Sure. Thanks, Sunil. Well, first, our organization made sure everyone was safe and as informed as possible. We communicated plans to first postpone and then to remain nimble and to pivot with each new set of information that was coming toward us. keeping in mind, of course, well-being of our people first. We made it a priority to maintain the qualities of life and salaries and benefits by balancing the reduction of performance expenses. So within just a couple of weeks and very early on, we began to steward not only the well-being of our people, but the broader community. We made wellness phone and Zoom calls. Even as a performing arts institution, we felt if we couldn't deliver what we were going to be doing in person at the time, that we'd reach out and connect. So we encouraged our patron base to support frontline workers and health and human services throughout the region, first out of the gate. And with the postponement of performances right in early March, and in keeping in line with the health and safety recommendations, we offered stay in shape classes for dancers. We launched academy training programs digitally within a few weeks to keep kids and families engaged, and transitioned remote access for full staff. We pivoted, as we like to say in the dance world, we pivoted to deliver our art, and we did so for free. We broadcast some archival ballets, and I would say, Sunil, that most important to us is we just centered down as an organization on that real deep connection between arts and culture, and how do we communicate the human spirit and really what it binds us all together in our sectors. And at its deepest levels, the ability to share those creative experiences are only, we are unique in the arts and culture to do so.
Well, I mean, I may get into this a little bit with Rebecca in a moment, but tell us a little bit about the seating capacity and how that affected your earned revenue and how you dealt with limitations on seating.
Absolutely. So we not only pivoted the productions, but we began producing not only virtually, but in person. So we went into the parks and we painted circles in the grass and did temperature checks. And we had a couple of thousand people in our community come out and celebrate the joy of creativity live and in person. Then in the fall, we produced a hybrid in-person and then videotape production in a ballroom. And it's the gentle balance of grand production with, these have certain inalienable expenses and revenue that gets tied to those expenses. So we slowly and moderately and conservatively took one from the other, and we're able to keep things healthy, in balance, and keeping a real priority on the people. And what was amazing about it is we culminated, everybody knows in the dance world, we love producing the Nutcracker. It's a holiday favorite. And we partnered with a local broadcast television station. We did a 1 hour reduced Nutcracker. And normally in person, you'd get maybe 25,000 people that would see it, but over 130,000 people saw the Nutcracker. So there were benefits to pivoting and going into a new space for us.
Well, that's great. And Rebecca, how about in your experience? I just want to say, I was going to note also that Rebecca, in your case, there's also a dimension to me that really stood out in the report about, the artists you serve through your work too. There's also that unique kind of relationship you have with artists through your work. Maybe you could just describe how you got back on your feet after the pandemic.
Thank you, Sunil. I'd be happy to. Just quickly, for those who don't know, Gala is not a party. It's Grupo de Artistas Latinoamericanos, formed in 1976 in response to a group of political exiles from South America. So our mission has always been to engage a wide and diverse public, build bridges of understanding between Latinx and non-Latinx communities, and use theater as a tool for social change. So we produced an annual season of plays in Spanish. We commission Latinx artists. We present, we have a year-round after-school program for Latinx and BIPOC youth. Before COVID, we reached about 20,000 people. I remember exactly when the pandemic hit, because we had just opened a commission play about Rigoberto Menchú, the indigenous leader from Guatemala. And the next day, the city shut down, and 2 days later, I tested positive for COVID. So the organization had an immediate in-house experience with shutdown and with protecting the health and well-being of all of our artists and anybody who had been in the theater. We had to quickly contact. Luckily, there were only 35 to 40 people there that day. So they were contacted and nobody got sick. We realized we had to cancel the rest of our season for everybody's health and in line with all of the guidelines. So we slowly engaged our artists through, thank heavens, Zoom. We are low-tech people, but we recorded artists in their own homes, either with a monologue or a piece of music. And then we spliced that together with an interview by our artistic director, Hugo, and called it Gala en Familia, Gala in Family, to reach out and engage with the artists. It also helped employ them. What was fascinating is what we did with the children's program, which normally only reaches like 5,000. We recorded artists reading illustrated children's books. And since then, about 40,000 to 50,000 people have logged on. There is a real scarcity of culturally relevant Spanish language material online, the content. It's incredible, given that this country is the second largest Spanish speaking country in the world after Mexico. So we felt it was really necessary to engage on all levels, to not disappear. And on the other hand, we don't have high tech. So for us to virtually, film and do those sorts of very large and lush productions was much more difficult. With the Paso Nuevo kids, we discovered they were really responding well with Zoom. They have a lot of pressures at home. They're single parent households, usually mothers working the gig economy. So what we did safely and working, and I must give a shout out really to the city, to the mayor's office, the Office of Planning and Economic Development, and the Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. Working with them and with a grant, we were able to renovate over the summer because construction was essential. So we put in a new HVAC system with MERV 14 filters, and we did new seats and new
I think you got to know more about HVAC than you ever wanted to, right?
I wish I had gone to college for HVAC because I should have been an engineer. But that enabled us to bring some of the kids, small groups, 6 to 8 kids, I'm talking back personally, but to them it was the world. They were very depressed. They weren't doing well. And they were able to engage with their peers and to do a tremendous podcast about climate change, which has gone all over the world now. Who knew, right? That podcast would be the future of our theater arts program.
Let me just kind of ask you all, and we talked about this informally, but just technology. What's your sense of, the promise and the difficulty? One of the things we're hearing from a lot of arts organizations, and this clearly came out in your report, we have some data, is there's just how global your audiences potentially can be. And so there's all this great narrative around being able to engage all kinds of people who may not have engaged with your art form before or with your venue. On the downside, of course, there's a lot of, there's a learning curve, and and there's costs, and there's not a clear monetization pathway for that. Does anyone want to chime in about how you've handled this balance and how you've kind of managed to still be true to your community needs through providing them opportunities for in-person experiences, but also manage this virtual engagement front?
Yeah, sure. I'll talk a little bit about it, Sunil. I think in the arts and culture sector, many of us, most of us, were not necessarily designed and built for the delivery of digital product. It's been a delicate balance moving forward because you are redirecting mostly funds that were in a lot of cases mission-centric for live delivery of an art form, or be it a museum or be it a performing arts institution. And I think we've learned a lot about collaboration. We've learned that there are some institutions locally and regionally that may have some of these resources, and we've tapped and partnered with local and regional connections to make things possible. I would say that that human connection that I referred to earlier is really important to remember as an institution moving forward, and decisions will need to be made about what resources will be at disposal moving ahead out of the pandemic, how much and how deeply you go into changing your mission, modifying your mission, and really to self-reflect on the delivery systems. I think we've made tremendous efforts in education, reaching those who otherwise wouldn't have been able to communicate and connect with your institution. But I do think there's going to be some interesting dynamics, and I hope some of the institutions that are more geared toward large-scale producing and dissemination, that partnership will flow.
Right, and we hear a lot that we're in it to stay. Perhaps this hybrid model. It's not necessarily that we're all in person or all digital, as it were. Chloe,
can I say
yes, please,
something
Rebecca.
there too? I just think, Scott, I agree. I think for the artist, it's totally different performing for a camera. We had the experience of filming our flamenco which everybody comes in per flamenco's, fiery, hot, you need the in-person. So we kept everybody safe and they were, quarantined and we filmed. But then after the film and the artist started looking at it and didn't like what they saw. So then you have to start again. And then, it becomes more expensive
Yeah.
and more expensive. And who do you market it to? Are all the artists agreed that you could market it to everybody when they were only paid once instead of being paid a 4-week performance fee? I think those are all questions we're dealing with.
Absolutely. Thank you. And Chloe, a slightly different question, although you're free to weigh in on what I just asked as well. Having gone through this experience, and again, we can only give you a thumbnail sketch in such a short amount of time, everyone who's watching, in terms of what they actually went through last year. But Chloe, having gone through all that, what do you think was the single kind of biggest challenge you faced, or put another way, what single or most important resource or piece of information do you wish you'd had before you began all this? Is there anything that would have helped you start faster or start smarter?
Sure. I think, especially in light of having Dr. Fauci join us at the beginning of this, and I think his, role in trying to guide the entire country, I wish that there had been more of a nationwide unified response, because I feel like a lot of people, not only in the arts, but across all industries, were really challenged to make a decision about the survival of their organization or business. Versus the potential survival of their staff members, their audiences, their customers, et cetera. So that's the single piece of information that I wish I'd had, which is, in Alabama, and this is where you said at the beginning, every community is unique. Our regulations around, the pandemic really dropped off pretty significantly in May. And we just weren't comfortable, even though we could have reopened, we just didn't feel like that was the right thing to do. So we didn't reopen our space until September. And I really wish I hadn't been in the position to have to make that call, because you never know, what the results of that are going to be. The long-term effects of being closed longer than you have to be. And if down the road donors are going to come to you as a nonprofit leader and say, but you could have opened in May and you could have been generating income, and why didn't you do that? So I think those kinds of questions were the most challenging for us. From a practical standpoint, I really wish we had had a technical director who wasn't a pro at the world of projection, but instead a pro at virtual programming and figuring out how we effectively use tools like Zoom, like we're using today, to really engage. We've figured that out and are getting better every week. But at the beginning, that would have been a great asset for our team.
Rebecca or Scott? Rebecca, do you have any thoughts on this? Like what you would have liked to have had?
I think the challenge was a lot of misinformation or changing information, and theater organizations have to plan. We've all been brought up to plan, right? And you have to replan and drop your plans and then convince your staff and your board that you're doing the right thing when you yourself don't know you're doing the right thing, because tomorrow the news is different about the pandemic. So I think it was very difficult, especially for our younger staff who come up through theater schools. This is the administration, the production, you have to have the schedule. It was and the messaging is very difficult. I mean, there's a lot of misunderstanding in the community, especially in the Latinx and BIPOC communities. One thing we want to do when we reopen is message about vaccinations, because a lot of our teaching artists who are Latinx don't want to get the vaccine. Is it legal that we don't hire them? There's not a lot of guidelines around whether you're allowed to not hire people if they don't take the vaccine. So those are the kinds of challenges, I think.
That's a great point.
Sunil, I'd only add briefly that it's the disparate information that came from variable sources, right? Who do you listen to at any given time? But I've got to say, solving it across the sector, it was this vigorous sharing of best practices that emerged among peer groups, local peer groups, regional, national, sector peer groups. And I think it really resulted in some unprecedented collaboration and new camaraderie. I really hope that we start talking as a sector, as a national endowed part of what are the benefits and how do we heighten the path of what we've learned and the benefits moving forward. There are great learned effects.
The partnerships have been so improved, I think.
Critical.
I agree with you, Scott. I mean, American Shakespeare Theater gave us all kinds of guidance and cues about how they did their hybrid opening and what we should
yeah.
do, what we shouldn't. So we were able to then develop that and add to that as it evolved. But, you know, if it weren't for the partnerships, we are just, you know, floating in the dark out here.
And that includes union groups, I take it.
And
too.
unions. We also had to work with the SDC, which was the Stage Designers Choreographers. They were extremely helpful. They have a scientific panel. We were rejected. We went back. We were approved. We did certain things. Very helpful, those sorts of guidelines.
This is great. And so kind of, you know, one of the things you mentioned, Rebecca, and I'll go back to Chloe in a moment, is, you know, you mentioned vaccination and how as part of your new rollout, that's going to be messaging about that is one of the strategies you're using. So I kind of wanted to ask all of you, you know, kind of looking ahead, you know, what have you, not only, you know, you just told us some of the things you've learned, but what does the outlook look like for your organization, you know, even after this report has been published? Like, is there anything you're going to be doing differently based on what you've learned, or anything your organization is doing in the coming year? We're all trying to get our footing here and figure out how to move forward. Chloe?
Yes, so when we reopened our physical space in September, we did so only allowing 12 people in for each screening. We have two 100-seat theaters in our space. So we were only selling 12 tickets. We've increased that to 18 since September. Very exciting movement. You know, we have a very strict mask policy that's enforced. You know, we are providing assigned seating for everyone that comes in to ensure that there's that 6-foot distance. We, like Rebecca, had new HVAC systems installed and all sorts of, you know, improvements to the physical space to lessen people's contact.
Mhm.
Obviously, all those things are still in place today. We hope that we can remain open as we have done without incident since September of 2020. And just slowly increase our capacity for our venue. Legally, we can be at 100% capacity if we'd like to be, but that is not what we feel is the wisest option for us. And so we're not there yet. We're at less than 25% of our facility, and I'm not sure how long we'll stay there. Our annual film festival typically takes place in August, and it's on the calendar for this August as well. But it will be in reduced capacity venues. It will have a lot less of the sort of social and party elements that might normally be a part of our festival, be a little bit more focused on the film elements alone, the things where we can control where people are sitting and how they're, you know, interacting socially. Not that there isn't a focus on film normally, but we
Right.
typically have receptions and luncheons and those kinds of things. So, you know, we hope to be back in our historic theater district this year with a combination of indoor and outdoor events and film screenings. And what the future holds beyond that, I wish I knew. I wish we all knew.
Godspeed. Scott, and maybe one other question for you, Scott, as you kind of think about the outlook. I've been meaning to ask also in terms of the mix of subscribe, you know, in the past, I'm sure you had a subscription model and single tickets buyers. I assume we're now talking about a lot more single ticket kind of operations than subscriptions. Are you still doing subscriptions too?
Yeah, Sunil, actually we are, but we're being much more flexible. You know, I think the commitment that we're seeing to people desperately wanting to get back to a sense of normalcy, back to that human connection, we are noticing people having an interest in committing with flexibility moving forward. But as we ramp back up, we're back in the park in May. Then we go back into the theater at 25% capacity in June. We have a socially distanced summer academy where, you know, kids will come and train with us, but at far lessened capacity. And then, you know, projecting into next fiscal year for us is much like my colleagues are speaking about. It's slow and steady and learning from the past year, going back with gentle engagement where people feel like, you know, we've done this already. It's okay to go back into a park. We'll go slowly into the theater in the fall. And then all hopes are high for getting back to normalcy by the holiday time. But we're monitoring, as Chloe was saying. We wish we had this crystal ball. We're watching, obviously, the rollout of vaccines, A little bit more concerted communication efforts coming from government sources has been very helpful. Looking for that magic, what herd immunity means for sense of normalcy, and preparing for masking up, remaining socially distanced, and staying nimble, being able to pivot. The business models that we've put in motion can expand or contract and still keep our organization healthy and moving forward.
That's great. And you, Rebecca?
Yeah, the nimble is the word, Scott. I think that is what we are trying to be. We were just recently approved for a reopening. It's really an extension of our waiver in the fall, but it's only from April 22nd to May 20th. So we will go forward with the play that's been canceled 3 times, which is music to the artist's ears. And but who knows, after that, we have a huge tango play coming up. It's a dance musical with some artists who are supposed to come from Argentina. So we don't know what's happening with that. That's the June. We are, of course, the same priorities of keeping everybody healthy and safe. We will use this window to talk to our audiences about, please get vaccinated. If you know somebody who feels differently, let's talk about it. Probably the youth will be dealing with that. It's easier for them to message these sorts of things, especially with their families, a lot of immigrant families. We also are going to continue our storytelling project, which we did outdoors, thanks to the Kresge Foundation. Stories from the parking lots. During the pandemic and over the summer, we gathered in small groups, social distancing, in underutilized parks and storefronts and alleys. And we brought together seniors, youth, business owners to talk about safety. What is home to you? What is culture? What's gentrification? What issues can we discuss as a community? And we videotaped those and wove them into a dramatic presentation. A very wonderful poet, Kiki Avalos, a local Salvadoran poet and social advocate, is creating this work. We want to take it to the city once they reopen, so that the developers and the people who have gentrified our neighborhood and turned a lot of the African-American churches into condos hear the voices of the community. So this has been an opportunity during COVID and post to reconnect with segments of the community who rarely have a voice and who are never consulted, certainly when it comes to development or gentrification. Combination of using the arts to really engage and then eventually bring them back into Gala if they have not been to live performances.
That's great, Rebecca. And just Rebecca, I don't remember from the report, your dancers, so your actors, or do they use, do you isolate them in pods, or are you still planning to do that?
We isolate them in pods and we have them tested weekly. Some of them are getting vaccinated now. A majority of our staff has been fortunate enough. DC has done a great rollout job. I think the mayor has worked very hard to balance the urgency of the health crisis, the public health crisis, to keep that foremost, but also to respect the economic impact of COVID on the city. So there are programs that are helping us reopen, a bridge fund that is helping all small businesses to pay their employees. And without that kind of help, it certainly would not have survived. So I'm thankful we're sort of blessed to be in that situation. And going forward, as I said, we will go slowly. Like Scott, we only are allowed to have 25 to 30, sell 50 tickets. It'll probably be closer. Even if we want 50 people, we're not sure that they're ready to come. Yeah. So you deal with that other thing called fear, and deal with your boards and stakeholders and corporate people. So putting all that together, we'll be lucky to do this one window and then see what happens.
And speaking about, you mentioned the board, your board. I was thinking that, we've seen a lot of funders have been very generous at this time. And yes. Have you had good, in terms of donor relations, how's this kind of shifted in terms of your relation, the way you work, contributed income? Is any of it shifted from your own end, Chloe or Scott?
Yeah, I would say, Sunil, we decided very, very early on that it was about communicating and stewarding and informing. And we had an opportunity to ask people how they were doing, how their families were doing. And we were very gentle in suggesting that they can participate in the ballet as frequently or as gently as they'd like to. And then here was the series of options. And depending on whether you were a ticket buyer or a contributing patron or an Academy family, we actually found it successful to keep those opportunities moving forward, to connect. And we made a choice early on to very deliberately not do any type of emergency funding at the ballet. And that's kept an outlook of continuity, of return to normalcy. And we've been very, very lucky to have a maintenance of giving and contributions and people participating at the ballet.
Well, that's great.
I think we've had an experience where our contributed income from individual donors, which is quite a small percent of our budget, being that we are culturally specific, and that kind of giving is not easy in the Latinx community. But we saw an increase. We saw people who felt engaged and did not want us to disappear. If we don't tell the Latinx story, who will? And we certainly can't disappear for a year. So I think there was an outpouring that really increased. We do 2 annual individual donor campaigns, and we surpassed what we normally do. So, which was surprising, given the economic circumstances.
Well, that's great. So I think we're going to get some questions now that were kind of that we received previously, and then I'll read them out to you and get your thoughts on them. Thank you for everything so far, of course. So we have this, let me just scroll up here. We have a question. I think it's from Tony. Everyone's, okay, somebody from Suitland, Maryland. Okay, everyone's comfort level is different where the pandemic is concerned. And it seems that the safest route to take is to center on those who are the most nervous about returning to live public performance. I'd like to know what patron service practices the organizations have in place to put patrons at ease before they arrive at their facility, to put them at ease if they feel uncomfortable in the facility upon arrival, or staff being trained, or have processes being determined regarding potential scenarios when a patron is panicked or the patron is disobeying facility protocols. And I remember from one of the case study interviews, we talked about this, where sometimes people didn't want to wear a mask, and they had to have that conversation before they entered the building. And so maybe you could talk a little bit about, in general, what kind of practices you have for dealing with maybe kid gloves, or being maybe not so much kid gloves with patrons about this, and how to handle, communicate this level of comfort when they arrive at the facility. Chloe, well, in your case, it was maybe not as difficult, but maybe you can disabuse me of that.
Yeah, so we have a pretty strict mask policy, and we are currently under a statewide mask ordinance. So it's not just our rule that we are asking patrons to follow. It is the rule of the state right now, although that is expected to expire in early April. At that time, we still intend to maintain our mask policy. Probably won't do so until Dr. Fauci suggests that it's safe to do otherwise. But for us, we are a really, really small team. There are 9 total paid employees on our staff. And since the closure of our facility last year, those staff members have had to maintain their regular desk jobs and also begin working front of house. So I don't know that we've done formal training about how to have the conversation with a customer who doesn't want to wear their mask, but we have definitely experienced that, and everybody on the team at one point or another has had to have that conversation with someone coming into the facility. We communicate on our website that a mask is required and that social distancing is required. We also communicate what all the various protocols we have in place are for their safety, as well as that of our staff members. They get that in a reminder email when they purchase a ticket. So before they arrive at the show, they've seen it again. It's printed on their print at home ticket.
Yeah. Right.
And when they arrive, they begin seeing signage as soon as they enter the building about the fact that they have to wear a mask. We have hand sanitizer everywhere. We have free masks for anybody who doesn't, have one with them when they arrive. The signs then are in place throughout the facility. You see them again on the screen before the film plays. We're really just sort of driving it home that we have a zero tolerance policy. We haven't had too many significant incidents, which is great. And I think for the most part, we have a really COVID conservative audience. People that are taking it very seriously and have done a good job of self-quarantining, throughout the past year. And so I think some of our peers in the local community, not running independent theaters, we're the only one, but running other businesses, haven't had perhaps as COVID savvy of an audience as us. And so we've had an easier go of it, perhaps, than some.
God, that you said it casually, but it sounds like an awful term, COVID savvy, which we weren't there, but I guess we have to all be that. Thank you very much, Chloe. Scott, what about you in terms of what, describe maybe briefly what you all do to kind of put people at ease?
Yeah, I would echo everything Chloe just said. It's all about communication and then re-emphasizing that you've been communicated with. And we found it very useful to make sure that there are alternates to the art form. If you're not comfortable, or if you don't think you're going to feel like you'd like to keep your mask on during the duration, that's okay. You can view our offerings on another vehicle digitally. The social distancing, if you determine the seating ahead of time, you've built in some pretty good preconceived parameters of safety. So I do know that when we do fully return to the theater, it will be socially distanced, and we will be monitoring, when health officials like Dr. Fauci say it's now safe to get a little closer, and we're now at 3 feet distance. And, in small gatherings, if you've all been vaccinated, you can now remove your mask. We're monitoring things of that nature. But I think offering alternatives to delivery of your art form and it has been very, very important to us.
Yeah, and Rebecca, you can talk about this, but also I want to kind of also blend this with a question I've got from somebody named Jonathan about how do we effectively communicate to audiences that we've created healthy spaces to engage with the arts post-pandemic. Similar thing, but I think this question's more about demand, like even before they come there, like how do they feel confident to enter, or even to even know that they're, hey, I'm going to go out to go to the theater because I feel confident they would know what they're doing.
Well, we discuss it in the staff all of the time in terms of messaging. Again, as Scott was saying, we put it in our press release, which we hadn't done before. We tell them to go click on our website to see it, and then we telephone people. Again, like Chloe, we only have 10 people on staff, but most of the people now are dealing with patron relationships or safety of the theater. Even the production people, for example, when we opened in the fall, the set designer created a plexiglass house behind which, or within which, the actors performed, and it happened to work with the theme of the play because it was a Spanish comedy about class warfare. So they're all stuck in this plastic, container, so to speak. But it kept the audiences and the artists. We're continuing to do that, and as we open now with only 19% capacity. In April, we will have a plexiglass sneeze guard in front of the whole stage that lights up. It's about 1950s radio theater in Peru, so it has a Hollywood effect. So we've made the sneeze guard a kind of very attractive thing in front of that. We also, we have to go, very carefully and make sure we continue to message this, continue to obey the CDC guidelines, the city guidelines. If you have singing, for example, if we do the tango, instead of the 20 feet, it has to be 30 feet. So that will change who we can see. We're constantly redoing our seating. And as Scott says, we really have to enforce, reservations, and you can't just change your seat because you see somebody you like, which is something people in our community love to do. So we're much stricter about that now. You sit in this seat because you're 5 seats away from somebody else. The most you can buy are 2 tickets. You can't buy a group of 4 because that limits our capacity even more because you have to zigzag people the 6 feet back. So it's always it's a dynamic daily process as people reserve slowly, to tell them where you're going to sit and what the policies are, and you have to have your temperature taken. And if you have one, no, you cannot come in. And just enforce it. We've had to hire. We've really beefed up. The good side is we've managed to train many more volunteers because we need them.
Wow.
We were lax on volunteer training. So another way of engaging our Latinx community, we have a great volunteer coordinator now who's our COVID tracker. Basically, he's our COVID tracker. It's a new job position at Gala. So, that has really helped, I think, improve our ability to work during, this pandemic.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that because I'll take one more question. But before that, I just wanted to ask if I could, just this, what's your kind of process of continually engaging with your artists and your staff and kind of dealing with these issues which may or may not come to the fore of mental well-being and emotional health? What kinds of, do you have any practice for that? Is it more like you just kind of try to be very attuned to it and vigilant about those issues? Do you have anyone want to weigh in on that? Because we all know it's kind of, maybe people who go to the arts and enjoy the arts as clients or patrons, so to speak, may not occur to them how what a toll it takes.
I would say, Sunil, it's people first, and concentrating on the well-being and making sure that even in a Zoom and virtual environment where you're working, that you can take time away for yourself. It's very difficult. I don't think we were wired to be on screens in 2x2 boxes, and it takes a lot of mental energy to go there. Reiterating that people still need to take their flexible time off, and if they need a sick day, that's okay. And over communicating, I think filtering information from leadership throughout the teams has been very, very important. Lots of questions. Everybody is uneasy. Reiterating to your teams and your creative staffs that the mission is still being attended to, and that there's a path forward, and gathering information. Lots of Q&A sessions, and the simplest things will come up that you never imagined someone would be concerned about. It's been very useful throughout the year to do more engaging.
Okay, I wanted to get that in there, and I know we probably have more to talk about there, but let me just go to one more question if I could. So and let me just say, preface before I ask this question, just to let people know who are watching, we've got a lot of questions that were directed at Dr. Fauci, and we're not going to presume to talk for NIH here, but we will let them know about the questions because those are really helpful, and I'm sure will help them think about possible responses in the future. This question is, what effect do you expect mass vaccinations to have on the reopening? And will a ticket holder need to show proof in order to be allowed in? Any thoughts on that? I know one of the big things we learned from the report, of course, was how varying, but how robust, nevertheless, testing was for so many of you. Like all the 9 organizations we spoke with in depth had some kind of testing protocol or worked with a service to do that. I guess this is a whole new kind of area with vaccines. Have you thought yet about, are you going to require proof at the door to show their arm, or what are we talking about here?
We were considering offering discounts to people who got vaccinated, but I'm not sure that's legal. I mean, it's sort of like, which comes first, the horse or the cart. So, we tossed that around, but I do think, doing a campaign, especially within the Latinx community for vaccination, and working closely with our partners at Mary Center, we had a great communication during this whole time that the artists were in quarantine with Mary Center, because they provided some free testing constantly. But I don't know, I don't think we could stand at a door and say you can't come in because you're not vaccinated. Our approach would be the same questions we asked. Have you been in contact with anybody? Have you had a fever? Have you felt sick? The mask, the temperature taken, all of that. I will continue to enforce that.
Is there one more response to that, or are we good? Does anyone else have a response to that? No?
We're not planning to require that. We're a part of the National Association of Theater Owners and Operators, and the advice from them has been you cannot require such a thing for a wide variety of reasons. So we're not planning to require that. We are planning to utilize our screen as a mechanism for advertising vaccine opportunities for anybody who is in our space. And then again, maintaining the mask policy, the temperature check at the door, all of those things until we're given that big thumbs up.
Well, this is great. Well, thank you. I want to thank you all, Scott, Chloe, Rebecca, and all of our attendees for this. And if I had access to the button, I would press it and you would see the hands go up, the emoji hands and everything. But thank you so much for spending time with me today and with everyone. And thank you all who've joined. I want to let you know a few things before we close out. You saw on the right-hand side, the chat box, various resources that on the National Endowment for the Arts website about COVID-19. There's information about the American Recovery Plan, press release having to do with that, some facts and frequently asked questions. People were interested in what Rob was discussing. We also have the latest guidance from CDC on large-scale gatherings, so go check that out as well. And of course, this very report, The Art of Reopening. I just wanted to say that we're so pleased to announce that due to the extraordinary response to this webinar, something like 7,000 or so folks, I guess, we will be hosting monthly virtual convenings to highlight the reopening practices of other arts organizations. So we hope to cover a broad swath of different types of art forms and groups. We invite you to stay in touch with us regarding any reopening issues, and we will be forwarding you a link afterward. You can either opt in or out to stay informed of this and other programs actually related to the American Recovery Plan. If you'd like to stay engaged in this conversation, we invite you to also submit any success stories or challenges you might have encountered in reopening. Hopefully this will build that community you were talking about, Scott, getting that muscle going and sharing these ideas with more people. So please let us know how you're doing in your reopening efforts. And if you would like to share your story on our website as a panelist in one of our webinars. Thank you all so much. And everybody have a great day.